Naj, it is such a pleasure to have you here again. We had such a wonderful conversation last time, and I'm glad that you're doing this again with me. Share a little bit with our audience who you are, what you do, as a quick reminder for those who have not caught the first recording of us.
Sure. Thank you for having me on. My name is Naj and I. I'm a therapist and a coach. I've been working with high performers and people with relational and lifestyle issues for about 10 years. Just recently, Instagram has been a really great opportunity to really dive deep into the attachment and relationship space. So I'm here to talk about it.
Right. Like I said, last time it was so insightful because we talked so much about attachment styles and how they affect us in our relationship and what happens when we're not working on not only understanding our own attachment style and healing, but also our partner or family members, because everyone we're connected to, we've got an attachment style. But today we have an interesting topic. How do we go through the breakup? Everyone, especially those on the anxious attached style, they want to know what's going on in the minds of someone who's got an avoidant attachment style. And those on the avoidant attachment style, or those with an avoidant attachment style, can't quite understand why, when they've asked for space or there's a breakup, the anxious attached person can't stay put. So I'm going to ask you first if you could just first guide us through what leads or what generally leads an avoidant attached person to just decide and say, you know what, I just can't do this relationship anymore. It seems
Mhm.
that it might just be like something that comes out of the blues for somebody who's got an anxious or a secure attach. So I'll let you take this.
Yeah. Uh, it's it's a series of misses. The internal experience of someone who has an avoidant attachment is that people really don't care about what I'm going through. People don't see my experience. And if I do talk about my experience, you can't really handle it. My experience is unwelcomed and unwanted. There probably have been attempts. Maybe not, but let's pretend there have been. Oftentimes, because it's so unsettling for the person with an anxious attachment to hear anything that threatens the relationship, the person with the avoidant attachment has learned that I actually have a very narrow window. I have to thread the needle if I'm going to give this person feedback or complaints about how this feels or how this relationship is going. And so they will either keep that to themselves, so they'll have a whole catalog of things that are going wrong, about how they don't get the space they need, they don't get heard the way they need. This person isn't doing this person isn't doing that. So then at the end, it seems like, oh, this came out of the blue. I've been blindsided. This person just abandoned me. But in reality, the person with an avoidant attachment has been dissatisfied for probably a pretty long time, but unfortunately are very bad typically at communicating those things. Again, one, because there's not enough safety in the relationship to tolerate someone poorly explaining their experience. And on the other hand, they're just not that connected to their feelings. They don't articulate their feelings well enough. And so it may even come out as criticism or blame and make their partner defensive as naturally they would. So I think there's a recreating of a dynamic from their childhood where they're feeling unseen and they're very sensitive to that, really care about what I'm going through, even though, of course, their partner does. Any slight indication that their partner can't tolerate the avoidance experience is read as this relationship's doomed because I can't be myself here. So then why bother? Hopelessness sets in.
Yeah. Now, while the anxious attached person can pick up on the energies, they know their partner's not happy, they could feel
Mm-hmm.
that shift.
Mm-hmm.
They can't read a person's mind unless you're
Mm-hmm.
studying attachment styles like we are. You just can't get into the mind of the different attachment styles, right? What would you have hoped your partner would have said? Or was there anything that they might have been able to do or say that would help you open up a little more?
Amazing question. So, my current partner, my fiance, she noticed this and she said, you kind of disappear on me. Yeah, this is early on in the relationship. And I said, we text throughout the week. She's like, no, emotionally, you just sort of disappear. What's that about? She's a therapist. I'm a therapist. So we had the opportunity to deep dive into our relational patterns and the way that I was maintaining space. And earlier on in my relationships, it sure felt like I was being told, you're not meeting my needs. You aren't here for me. I need more from you. And I'd say, it feels like you want too much. And so instead of there being a negotiation process and we're both very curious about the other person is going through, it always feels like, at least to me, like this person wants more than I can give them at this moment. Whereas my current partner has said, well, this is where you're at. How do I get you to where I need you to be? And can we get there? Because if there's a roadmap to getting there, I'm here, you're here, let's make this happen. But she leans anxious, I lean avoidant. And if we can't get there, then there's nothing to do. There's nothing, no healing that's going to happen. So a conversation about where you're at and can you get to where I need you to be, which is very nuanced and so hard to do for most people. If that can happen, yeah, I think couples can work it out.
Yeah, I think, and that's it, right? Like, what do you say? How do you say it? There's just so much to how we communicate when we listen, and all of this impact how the other person shows up or how they feel. Do they feel safe enough to share
Yeah.
those feelings? I find in my personal relationships, it's less talking. It's more
Mm,
understanding where the other person's at and reading that body language and knowing, okay, it's time to step back. Even things
mm,
like, an avoidant attached person generally will zone out when the conversation gets too heavy. You could see
yes.
that just gone, right?
Guilty.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I've learned with my partner one of two things, depending on where we are. I'll either touch his arm or I stop the conversation, right? And
Yeah.
just move on. But I find that
Mm,
these relationships work best when you know exactly how to communicate. And I find that when we talk too much about what our needs are, it starts to make the person feel pressured, like you
yeah.
mentioned, and
Absolutely.
just wait for them to process their
Hmm.
emotions and let them show up as best as they could. Another thing that I find like can be really difficult for the avoidant attached person as well is when they feel like they're not, whatever they do is never good enough.
Absolutely.
Little thank yous, and be specific what you're thanking them for goes a long way. And people tend to
Yeah.
do more of that.
I see you're trying. You do need this, but I see you're trying. I appreciate it. I mean, I'm blown away at your ability to regulate in a moment where your partner is starting to shut down, because that I think is a moment of deep understanding, emotional generosity, which I think is the piece missing from the dialogue. It takes a lot of emotional generosity to navigate a conversation with someone with an insecure attachment. You have to always assume goodwill. They're not trying to check out on you. They don't not care. They're here because they care. But they also can only handle so much. You're not talking to their personality. You're talking to their nervous system. And that nervous system will take over. It will take over and shut them down when it feels the need to.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's important to take space. Look, I wish I thought this way when I was in my 20s and
Yeah.
30s. I was not this person. So, while I asked you about what's really going on in the mind of a person who's, avoidant attached, and you're thinking about can you handle the relationship or do you need to check out of it? I've been in the mind of an anxious attached person, and when your partner starts to pull away, when the avoidance starts to pull away, they may not even notice it. They may
Yeah.
not notice that the
Yeah.
texting has decreased because most of the times they're in their head and don't realize there's a disconnect with reality. And here you are as the anxious attached, and you're seeing it all. You see the patterns change, and panic sets in. I mean, absolute panic, where it's like you don't know what to do. And that's the time when the anxious attached tries harder, which I'm going to guess, this is your story, but I'm going to guess that you might start to feel overwhelmed, guilty, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah,
Feel
of
like
course.
maybe you should stay.
Guilt, I think, is the predominant feeling that people who are on the other side of partnered with someone with an avoidant attachment, they don't see the guilt, so they imagine it's not there. But every single one of the people I work with and myself are struggling with lifelong feelings of guilt and regret because all we were trying to do is meet the needs of someone else while not feeling too overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And what we walked away feeling was there's nothing I can do that will help this person feel like they're loved. And there's nothing I can do to ever feel like what I'm doing and giving is good enough. I must have done something wrong. I'm the one that's broken because that's the message. It's the message online. That's the message in so many creators, all their content. is that the avoidant person is the one that walked away. Therefore, they're the ones at fault here. All the anxious person wants is love and to show love. And it's such an unfair narrative because inherent to showing love is attunement, understanding, compassion. I understand if you're deeply, deeply avoidant, you may not deserve that to some degree. Someone needs to walk away from you. You're not ready for a relationship. But to the degree that someone is trying,
Mhm.
right? I think you and I can both seen that those, because they're not enough, because they're not the right ways of trying, because it's not exactly what the anxious person needed,
Mhm.
it is then, if you loved me, you would have done more.
Now, I can speak from an anxious attachment perspective. And I think in this regard, I will. Looking back at who I was in past relationships, I was demanding,
Yeah,
needy,
yeah,
controlling.
yeah,
I could not see that in that emotional space
yes,
because that other person, I depended or I believed that I needed them to survive. They had become my absolutely everything. I had forgotten myself
yeah,
because I was putting so much energy and effort into them. Every action is kind of like a job. You put
hmm,
your everything, you invest your everything, and now you think you're going to lose it. It's your livelihood. So that's the
wow,
way I treated relationships. And now I'm going to another human being and I'm saying, you're not doing what I want you to do. You're not saying what I need you to say.
yeah,
So I can be happy without thinking this person is doing their best, but only to their ability. I
hmm,
couldn't see that we all have a gauge on how much we're capable of doing based on how healed we are. But it
well,
wasn't that, they were, I had partners who were bad people.
yeah,
They were good people, just
yeah,
communicated differently. And I think, now where I'm at, it's kind of, it's a tricky and an unfair thing to do to ask another human being, show up for me the way I want. How can you possibly know? How can
well,
you know how to show up for me?
did
Even if
you
I tell you.
did you even know? Was there something that they could actually say or actually do something specific? Then you go, oh, finally, now I feel safe, or is it sort of like a constant moving target? Because that's my experience of working with someone who's anxious attached. It's really
Absolutely.
never going to be the right thing.
Absolutely. So I started my active healing journey when I was 27. And I think it was like late 30s. I realized that I was saying things like, I want you to be a peaceful place for me. I want someone who would make me happy.
Yeah,
It was just so broad. Like,
it's
what does
broad.
happy mean, really,
Yeah,
right? I love this person. And then I realized, is this really love? It doesn't look like demanding that they break themselves to make me happy. So, yeah, I had to sit and figure out, what does happiness really look like for me? Is it the good morning text all the time? Is that even necessary for me? And of course, that was one question like, no, it's not necessary. Do I
yeah,
need to hear I love you all the time? And for me, no. For some people, yes, I don't need
yeah.
to hear that. And then when I zeroed in on exactly what it was that makes me happy in a relationship, I'm on the same page with my partner. We need the same things. And after doing all of these studies and looking at my own relationship, I realized that the anxious attachment and the avoidant attachment are pretty much the same.
They're the
It's
same.
just one of them realize what they want but don't know how to ask for it. And the
Mhm.
other one asks but don't really realize what they want.
Yeah, I love that way of summarizing that. It's so much overlap. So many of the same feelings, so many of the same internal core beliefs about being good enough, being unloved, not no one really prioritizing them, no one seeing them and knowing them, but just a different way of responding to those feelings. Beautiful, beautifully said.
Yeah, it's like when I was talking about the good morning. I know a lot of people are like, well, how difficult is it to say good
Right.
morning? You and I have an idea of what goes on in the avoidant attached mind when it
Yeah.
comes to saying that good morning. You're waking up, you're hustling to get about your day, you're processing how the rest of the day is going to go. It's the last thing on your mind to pick up your phone and text someone. Then
Mm,
during the day, you're caught up with work and focus there. Again, this is your story. But
yeah.
for the anxious attached, you're so linked to your partner, so codependent on your partner, that without that good morning, you don't feel energized to go through the rest of the day.
Well, I appreciate the generosity. I will admit that it's not too much to ask, and it shouldn't be. The real challenge is when the anxious attached partner asks for something. It shouldn't, if they're being clear, if they're saying, "Hey, this is just something I need from you." Why wouldn't you, if you really care for this person, do your best to meet that? And when I work with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, I look at that resistance. They're not asking for too much, but you feel like it's a lot. You feel like it's one more thing that they need from you. But if we really look at it, they're only asking for what is actually quite reasonable, at least in this moment. Where's your resistance to giving them that one more thing? And there's so much resistance because that is their story, is that people always want more from them than they want to give. But in this one situation, they actually want to give it, but have run into a wall, an intimacy wall that they need to work through. I do think, of course, there's a lot of responsibility and accountability that the person with the avoidant attachment style has to take on, because when they have a partner who's finally learned to articulate what it is they need and want, they actually might back away and say, whoa, 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 this is a lot for me. And then, like with your story, you said, okay, okay, I hear you. That's a lot. What can you give me? There's a negotiation process because you're not reactive. You're not losing it. You're saying, I'm going to make an ask. You're going to figure out if you can give it to me. And then we'll talk about what really is possible here. That is the secure style communication that people need to work towards.
I agree. I agree. We need to work on it. I think where I'm at right now is looking at the person,
Yeah.
seeing what they're capable of. As
Yeah.
we get, I mean, especially the anxious, the avoidant attached as well. We've learned how to read each other so well. It's a part of our survival. So
Mm-hmm.
we started picking up stuff from the very first date. If
Yeah.
we choose to ignore it, we need to take responsibility for it. But
Yeah.
at some point, you've got to sit pen and paper and write, what is this person capable of?
Absolutely.
Okay, they've gone weeks, months without saying good morning. I keep talking about it. They don't do it. All right,
Mm-hmm.
I can't change this person.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get comfortable with this, or is it a reason to walk away from the relationship?
100%. And
Right? So we've got to take accountability. Go on. You wanted to say something. I'm
I'm going
sorry.
to say, it's going to be part of their story to continue to choose people who make them feel the way they're used to feeling, which is not chosen. And like they're not loved enough. And I love the work you're doing because it's saying the healing process isn't about changing them. It's about the acceptance within you that this is enough. It's okay. If you want to be with this person, I have to regulate around this feeling of disappointment. That's your work. They're actually giving you an opportunity to heal the disappointment you feel around everybody. You choose to do that work or not. Because if you don't, you will just choose more partners who disappoint you.
Now, just to backtrack a little bit, we talked about this is their story. Let's talk a little bit about their childhood when they were,
Mm,
they tried to show up as best as they could. They put in all the effort to please a parent, a caregiver, and somehow felt their perception was it was not good enough. They learned that I keep giving and giving and giving.
hmm
Now I'm losing my independence. I'm losing my autonomy. How can a simple ask as send me a good morning message, say hello now and again, how heavy that probably is for someone who's got an avoidant attachment style? Because the way I like to look at it is not this is the only relationship and I'm asking you for a good morning. Why can't you give it to me? I'm actually talking to a person who's got decades on them of being asked for things and it's never good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's two ways of looking at this. On the one hand, if you have empathy for the avoidant, you're recognizing that your ask is again not in isolation. It's an ask that is built on many, many asks, and their response is going to be, "Oh, what's next? How much else? What else do you need from me? Like, don't you understand what my morning is like? Don't you understand how much pressure I'm under? Don't you, I'm like, you don't see me." That being said, when the avoidant doesn't meet that need, their lack of empathy for their partner is a replication of the pattern they were in. Meaning, I was not shown consistent attunement and love, and I have a feeling I was raised with a feeling of lack. And when I don't text you in the morning, I promote that feeling within you, a sense of lack within our relationship. And so, as I better understand my childhood and what I went through, and the way my caregivers led me to feel, hopefully I can use that to say, oh, and then I go and make someone else feel that way. And that's one of the reasons I need to heal this because I'm just repeating that pattern.
So what happens is we go through this process, and
Mhm.
then the avoidant attached says, I'm out of here, right? I'm out of here. Now, there's a thing that I've noticed. Almost every anxious attached person or secure will reach out and say, everything was great. We just came back from a trip. They said, I love you just hours
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
What happened? And here are my thoughts. I want you to share. Let me know where we're on.
Hmm.
My thoughts are it's been kind of bumpy in the relationship. The avoidant attached has accumulated all of that information. And now something beautiful happens. Is it possible that the fear of, oh my gosh, I've gotten in the cycle of giving and making this person happy? Is it possible that I'm going to do something to disappoint them again? And I'm not sure if I could go through that cycle over and over and over. And that's where the switch goes off.
I say my one caveat to that is I've been doing everything I can to make this person happy. And because I don't ask for what I need or what I want, I'm actually not that happy. I'm not letting you do for me what I do for you. Because number one, maybe I don't even know. I'm not connected to what I need from you. I'm too scared to ask because I've never ever had anyone to ask before. And when I have tried, maybe it went poorly. And that's normal for a relationship, but I am so sensitive to any disagreement and conflict and so avoidant of those moments that I'm not going to push through. I'm not going to try to get you to negotiate with me. I'm just going to assume that you don't want to. No one wants to. No one has ever wanted to. And that includes you. So I'm doing everything. And in reality, you're not really doing anything.
Yeah.
Their reality, not the real reality. And so they walk away because it feels like too much work.
Well, what I often advise my clients to do, the anxious attached, is allow the other person, allow the avoidant attached partner to work on their own healing. Try not to jump in. Don't take it personally. Recognize that whatever is happening in their minds, whatever they think the relationship is or where it's going, there's nothing you can do to change their mind. Trying
Mm-hmm.
to convince them can probably come over as to them as, oh, this person's just trying to manipulate me into staying or doing something. So I find it's often best to just, even if you have to say to yourself, like, you know what, that's their problem, their healing to work on. Let me work on mine. Let me learn how to stay still and deal with my own emotions here and remind myself that that has nothing to do with me. And I think the space, just backing off to take care of yourself, allows space for the other person, the avoidant attached, to process. And it's in processing, again, your story, in processing that you tend to recognize that it's your trauma at play and not so much the reality. But I've noticed with my clients, it's like you need that space to do a proper processing.
Yeah. That's a magical, deepening, intimate process when it happens. But I think you and I have both seen why it goes wrong. Excuse me. It's a beautiful process when it happens, but you and I have both seen the hurdles for these two types of people to do it right. Because the avoidant has to have access to what's going on
Mhm.
inside of them so that they can externally process that, share with you, vent. And the anxious attached has to have the regulation and the containment to hear it all.
Mhm.
And I believe most people dip their toes into that dynamic. And because it doesn't go right immediately, it starts the cycle of this never working. You know, it has to go right. People typically need, I think, the tools to do this right and often don't have them. The regulation, the articulation, all this stuff is so high level, right? You know, it's not something I had in my 20s. You're saying you didn't have it in your 20s. I think people can learn it in their 20s. I've seen it, I've helped people do it. But it's not something that comes naturally, especially if you haven't been given these tools since you were young.
Yeah, like, so let's say the relationship ends, and the question I get from the anxious attached is, what happened? They're not
Mm-hmm.
responding. they're closed off. I don't think we're ever going to get back together. And, it's like, I think I should reach out. The panic is, I think I should reach out because if I don't, they're never going to come back.
Yes.
They're going to go out with somebody else. Help me and help our audience understand what is going on in the mind of a person with an avoidant attachment style, when the relationship ends.
Yeah. I'm speaking in broad generalities. For most of the avoidant attachment style people, when it's over, it's over. Because I have already done everything I could. Feelings of hopelessness have set in. I've responded to that hopelessness by removing myself from the situation. Number one, I blame myself. Maybe, not always. I know some people have less ability to do that than others. But so I could be feeling some guilt because now you're hurt and that's my fault. And so I don't want to deal with that anymore. I don't want to confront that. So I'm walking away and there's shame for whatever mistakes I made. I'm definitely walking away from that feeling. And again, then there's hopelessness that I've tried. Now, most of the time, and you can share with me what you think about this. Most of the time, I've tried not a very concerted, organized effort. I tried really means, we've gone to couples therapy. We both sat down and talked and worked through it, but it's not that. What I've tried usually just means I opened up a little bit. They couldn't receive it. Look, I knew this was going to happen. You really just lose it all the time. You want what you, it's just, I've tried is a reinforcement of their internal narrative that they're not good enough and no one's going to be able to see them. So yeah, usually it's over for good because they've built up enough anger, resentment, and hurt to walk away without the sadness and longing that the anxious person will have.
What happens when that disappears? Because the anger doesn't stay forever.
Yeah.
Time moves on. You start to
Mm-hmm.
calm down and you start to look at
Mm-hmm.
the past and you only remember the good stuff.
Yeah. I think that is individual, person to person. If you are, this is slightly anecdotal, but if you are someone with opportunity for more partners easily, you're likely to just jump into the next relationship relatively quickly. Again, you're not really jumping into relationships necessarily. You're jumping into someone who is present for you enough so that you feel like, okay, that didn't work. Maybe this one will be better, but I'm going to keep them at arm's length and we'll see what happens, right? You're just doing that. You're cycling through people. If you don't have access to another person, as soon as you feel a sense of loneliness and sorrow, you wonder, oh, maybe I did that too quickly. Maybe I'm wrong, right? You're having a moment of reflection. Maybe they weren't as bad. Maybe I could have tried harder, right? You start getting into that Phantom X thing. And again, my anecdotal experience with this is it just depends really on how much access you have to new partners versus not.
I think the access to new partners will only perhaps determine how long it takes for that person to slow down and process the past relationship. So
Yeah.
I find what happens is in the beginning of the new relationship, everything's all rosy, everything's wonderful. And the
Mm-hmm.
moment a red flag becomes a little bit more like a fiery red flag, that's
Mm-hmm.
when the person stops and think, oh, wait a second, I'm down the same road. What did I do in my last
Mm-hmm.
relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten this question a lot. Do they come back? Chances are high, yes, they can
Mm-hmm.
come back. However, why are they coming back? What's going to be the results? A lot of times people will get back with their ex and start a relationship. And that's when they get that validation for themselves that I did make the right decision to leave. This is not going to work. And so the second time they leave, they can actually detach from that person.
Yeah.
But the Phantom X, it's really getting them locked in that thought that the person, they idolize that person without being able to look at what really caused the breakup.
Yeah, I mean, there's a strong possibility neither person truly sees the other. So when you're with me, when I'm with you and we're in a relationship, I don't actually see you. And when I leave you and then the anger is subsided, I still don't actually see you. Then I go back and I'm reminded, oh, right, this didn't work because I've idealized you, I've objectified you, and you're never really a person. You're really an
Yeah.
opportunity for my own soothing and healing and for my own lack of self-worth. And so when I feel lonely and like I'm not good enough, well, that person made me feel pretty good. Maybe I jumped the gun. I should try that again.
Yeah. Isn't it, or wouldn't it be helpful then if we learn to give our partners space in the relationship, space to miss us, space to see what it's like to be without us and process who we really are, what we really bring in the relationship? Because if we're on top of each other, we can't see each other.
You are going to upset a lot of people by saying that.
It's the
It
only
is,
thing that helps my clients, like give
you
space.
know, yeah. And again, I think it comes back to a deep level of attunement to your partners. Because if you have emotional generosity, trust, and attunement, you're saying, hey, you're a little moody today. Do you need space? And I think what really, I think, softened my heart in this relationship was my partner saying that to me and me checking in and going, oh my God, you're right. I'm so crabby. It's because I haven't had a day to myself in 2 weeks. She's like, you should do that. And I had to check in. You know what? I don't take that time because in my mind, I still believe to make you happy, I have to be eternally present, right?
Mm,
And like that's what I believe that the anxious attached partner wants, which I don't think is inaccurate. They want me to be eternally present. So for her to love me, she says no, take some space. And for me to love her, I try to be as connected and present as possible. And when we're both being generous, then it works really well. Neither one of
mhm.
us is saying, what about me? We're saying, no, 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 what about you and what you need?
Yeah, I think when I was more in the anxious attached, I wanted to be with my partner all the time. I
Yeah.
would cancel on friends and, neglect myself, my care routine, self-care routines. I just
Sure.
neglect it all.
Yeah.
Being more secure attached, I realized I like my alone time. I
Yeah.
like that when we're together, I could easily say, hey, I'm just going to the cafe for a walk for an hour.
Mm.
I want to
Yeah.
write. I want to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And I think, it's not something we talk about, but I sense that he can appreciate that. It makes the people around us know it's okay to speak up for themselves as well, to say, I want some alone time and not feel like they're going to get in trouble for it.
That's so important, right? Yeah. If I trust that you understand that I need some alone time because you sometimes need it too, then I feel safer to ask for it. And if you do ask for alone time, it makes me think, and maybe this isn't the healthiest mentality, which is, oh, they're gonna go with some alone time. Well, I should show up when they're done. I want to be present when they're back because they don't need me. They want me, but they don't need me. They're not dependent on me. Oh wow, that's really attractive. That's actually someone I want to be with because they're making a choice. They're not dependent on me.
Yeah, and I think what I've learned from clients again, the avoidant attached generally feels like my partner needs me to make them happy.
Yeah,
They don't just want me in their life, and it's
yeah,
not a fun relationship. It's you've got to do something to make me happy. If not, I'm going to leave.
yeah. Or I'm at least going to be unhappy with you and make you feel like you're not doing enough. So you better do it all. And that in part is your presence constantly, which is just too much for us. That maybe the word betrayal is too strong a word, but I think early in our lives, we learn to betray our own needs for the people around us to maintain connection. We push down our need for a lot of things, a lot of emotions, space, whatever. And so when we're in this relationship, we're naturally doing it again.
Mhm.
And then
I
we
like
leave.
that you use betrayal because I
Yeah,
do believe that we betray ourselves. We're so focused on what to do to make the other person happy.
yeah,
Don't cheat on them. Be loyal.
yeah,
Be respectful. Be kind. Be compassionate. And we don't do that for ourselves. And what's one of the worst feelings that we suffer when a relationship ends? The self guilt. Why
yeah,
did I do that?
yeah.
So, yeah, it is a betrayal. And I find that putting ourselves first, absolutely on the top of the priority, is so incredibly healthy for a relationship because it shows the other person you get to do the same. You have permission, you give yourself permission to do the same for you, and you learn how to show up.
Where do you imagine the message that putting yourself first so that the relationship can be happy and healthy and work, that's a wrong way to do it? Because that is in my comments section a lot when I've mentioned that, when other people mention that you can't be happy with someone else until you're happy on your own, and you can't have someone else make you happy. You have to put yourself first in the relationship. People respond to that really aggressively. Any ideas on that?
Well, I think, as children, we hear from caregivers, if you don't share with your sibling, you're selfish.
Mm,
If you don't give, you're selfish. And so we grew up people pleasing. We grew up giving and giving and giving. And
hmm
we don't know how to say no. We did know as babies. I mean, babies will scream when they can't have their way, and but we grew up with that mindset. If I don't keep giving and giving, then I'm selfish. And selfish became this negative, like a dark stain on us. We're a
Yeah.
horrible person if we're
Yeah.
selfish. But when we can take care of ourselves, when I can do the things that makes me happy, and I know I need space. Let's say, for example, guitar. I love to play the guitar, right? If I can love playing the guitar and I know what joy and peace that brings to me, and somebody can give me that space to do it, then I can appreciate that my partner may have something that he loves doing. And I can now appreciate the need for his space.
hmm
And it's the
hmm
same thing with, how I love myself or how I show up for my work, my clients, because I'm so busy and focused on my clients. I can appreciate it when my partner says, I'm really sorry, I'm in meetings all day and I don't feel the need to reach out because
hmm
I know where that person's at. And it only comes from putting yourself first.
Yeah.
Only
Yeah.
only then can you empathize with another person. And it's not selfish in a negative. Selfish in a negative is when we're manipulating people to get something from them without caring how that hurts them or how that affects them. That's selfish.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how the same word has come to mean two different things, and that people mix that up a little bit and believe that to be self-interested, to take care of yourself, to understand what you need and to make sure you get it, that feels bad to them. It feels like again a betrayal of the relationship. If you really loved me, you wouldn't ask for time alone. If you really loved me, you would be exactly what I needed, which is to be present. And I kind of can hear that little child who
Mm-hmm.
actually needed and wanted that. That was
Mm-hmm.
what they were supposed to have been provided. And now
Mm-hmm.
they want that from someone who's it's unfair to ask that from.
Well, I mean, a child needs to know that you're there for them, regardless of what part of the world you're in. I mean, my children don't live in the US. Well, three of my children don't live in the US with me, but they're very well aware that regardless of where they are, if they need me,
hmm hmm
I'm there.
Yeah.
And that's the consistency that's important.
Yeah.
They know for sure, mama's
Yeah.
going to drop everything and
Yeah.
show up.
Yeah.
And that's the reassurance that we need.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to go out into the world expecting the same thing because
Yeah.
they've learned that that's what love is, not the person constantly being there. And I
Yes.
was sharing with someone recently that I don't speak to my kids every day or every other day, or sometimes a week or two may go by and I don't speak with them.
Yeah.
But we're there. So that's the consistency as humans we need. We don't need the person to be sitting in front of us, but when we're still not sure, can we take care of ourselves? I'm sure my kids could take care of themselves. They're
Yeah.
sure I could take care of myself. So
Yeah.
we don't feel that pressure.
Yeah.
When we know that we can't take care of ourselves, that's when we need to be in constant contact with someone.
Yeah. In the object relations world, they call it concretizing, right? So because I don't need a concrete physical example of your love, because I have internalized it, because it was present for me at an important and developmental stage, I now know that if I'm out of the country or you don't text me that you still love me. But if I have a wound in that stage of life, I need you to be texting me all the time. I need you to be present for me all the time. That's how that will show up. It needs to be a concrete form of love because I can't internalize that you love me if you're not actually physically present.
Yeah, yeah. And using the example of my relationship with my kids, a lot of people would be like, oh, but what kind of a mother are you? And
Hmm.
I get bashed for that. And it has happened for years.
Yeah.
My children are little human beings. I've
Yeah.
learned to remove label.
Yeah.
I don't own them. So
Yeah.
and having that respect. But yeah, that's for, we could talk about kids and attachment and style later. A quick question or two, if I can ask. Why is there a struggle in articulating feelings. We talked about this earlier. Like, if the avoidant can only articulate exactly what they're feeling, or the anxious attached, but what are these feelings that an avoidant attached person is going through during the time of a breakup? We touched on, I'm free of this, but then what steps in later?
I mean, sadness, oftentimes regret, self-criticism, blame,
Do they
blaming.
ever want to reach out and apologize? And if they do, what's holding them back?
I think the history of the relationship and how those conversations have gone historically. I don't want to apologize to you if you won't take any accountability for your role in this. And oftentimes, because I'm the one that left, I'm going to get all the blame. But if you can't, if I don't trust that you can say, well, listen, I'm hurt and angry that you left without trying harder, but also see how I didn't provide a lot of safety. I also see how I wasn't that attuned to what you needed in this relationship. You, again, should not have left. I think you are unfairly, I think you treated me unfairly and you've hurt me, but get how there are things I could have done differently. I've almost never had a conversation that went that way. And because of that, I have stopped going back and trying to have like a get on the same page conversation. Because I do not have the faith. I have zero hope that if I have left you, that you will at some point later in life go, oh, you know what? Here's my role in that. I strongly believe, and again, I'm not necessarily correct, that you have determined I'm to blame. You did nothing wrong. So this conversation is just one more opportunity for me to feel shame and for you to feel self-righteous. Again, that's a narrative. I'm not saying that's true, but I know that that's very common in the minds of the avoidant attached person to believe that, yeah.
I got disconnected. I got disconnected for a second. Okay, yeah, continue right where we were.
I think that's very common in the minds of the avoidant attached person, is to believe that this is just going to be one more opportunity for me to take the fall and for you to feel like you did nothing wrong.
Now, what?
It's okay.
Start recording again in just a second. I just
No
want to make
problem.
sure it's fine. The usual question to the kids are you safe? Is it recording? Oh, yes, it is. Okay. When you're ready. Sorry. All right, we got that.
Yeah,
So,
we're talking about what goes on in the mind and
yeah, yeah.
about why they don't come back and apologize or have a conversation. And again, my belief, my experience is people are willing to apologize if they have faith that accountability will happen both directions and that they won't be
Here's a
blamed for that.
question.
Go ahead.
Let's say we're dating. We broke up, and you're the one who ended the relationship. I reach out to work things through, or you reach out for whatever reason. And I don't talk much about it. I don't talk about the past. I don't talk about the breakup. I don't ask you what happened. I don't ask you for closure. It's just a conversation like, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? And you respond, oh, I've been well. And I keep the conversation away from the past relationship we've had.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
When I was younger, that would be really nice because I'm like, oh, this person's past whatever problems, maybe they've changed. And I can start to project a lot of hopefulness onto you. As I got older, it would really be upsetting. Because again, what I'm looking for is an actual moment of repair, which means some amount of accountability. If you want to call me and act like nothing's wrong when there actually is something wrong, when something did happen, this is not going to go anywhere. But again, when I was younger, that would be great. You're past it, I'm past it. Let's move on. Let's try again.
What I also find, in addition to that, age and experience has a lot to do with it. But what I also find is that when you move into the relationship, not talking so much about the past, it's not that the avoidant attached does not know what happened in the past, but they start to make amends for what, or in a way, take responsibility without talking about it.
Yes.
So, what I've heard from some avoidant attached clients is that it's better not to talk about it because I feel shame all over again and it reminds me that I should run away. And I would hope that my partner would just give me a chance to prove that I am sorry. And
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's never been me, but it is so many people. I have always been a talker because I mean I've been a therapist for a long time. I've been studying this. I've always wanted to debrief, but I don't know why. It's just part of who I am. But when I've dated people who are actually more avoidant than I am, or working with a client that's historically why do we need to talk about it? Let's just move on. I've already let it go. You should let it go. Let's just try again, and this time it'll be different. Without any evidence of change or even knowledge that something needs to change for this to work differently.
That's perfect. What would be an advice that you would give to an anxious attached or secure attached who's going through a breakup or separation with a partner who's got an avoidant attachment style? What advice would you give to them as they try to stay grounded?
Oh man, this is not what people want to hear, but
That's all right. That's okay. Here's what, Nudge, I feel like there's so many of us on social media, and there's some of us who will validate the anger, which is fine. My channel, your channel doesn't seem to be the place where we do that. There are so many avenues for us to go and get the information that we want or we're ready for. And I feel like our channel is for those of us who wants to understand. And
yeah,
it's not going to resonate with everyone, and I'm okay with it. So,
yeah. Um, Someone is either going to try or they're not. Someone is either ready or they're not. There's a beautiful poem by Naira Wahid. She's I think, an African poet. She said, someone is either ready to meet you on the bridge or they're not. And there's so much beautiful, great love on the world that you should not have to convince someone to love you. And I highly recommend people learn to let go quickly and easily. And that's rooted in knowing. And a secure person has a better ability to do this because they're looking at the actual compatibility and saying, can you be what I need? Here's what I need. You're not that person. Oh, this is painful because I thought you were, but I'm going to move on. But if you have an insecure attachment, oh, it's such a deep, deep reflection of your worth and you're not good enough. And this person, if they loved you and wanted you, it would have proved that you're worthy. And since they didn't want you, you are deep in this hole, not of loss, but of self loss.
mhm.
So if you can learn to actually root yourself in true compatibility, this person wasn't right for me anyways. I learned a lot about what I needed and what I still have to work on, right? Some existential level understanding of the pain you're feeling. That will help you process and move on to someone who's actually good for you. A lot of self love. Again, I would tell them that if someone wants to be there, they will be. And that's not accurate. If someone wants to be there, they'll be trying at least. And if someone's not trying, that's not an indictment of you. It's an indictment of them. They're not there yet. They're not ready. And
Yeah.
it means you have to walk away.
Yeah, I think add to that, I believe we also need to look at their capacity.
Yeah.
Sometimes, a two or a four is all they can give.
Yeah.
And maybe you can give a six, but it's so important that we see the person for who they are and make
Mm-hmm.
a decision
Yeah.
not to try harder to change them, because that's not going to work. All it's going to lead to is frustration and disappointment and anger. To see them like this is who this person is and decide, do I accept it or not,
Yeah.
or leave. So
Yeah.
yeah, this has been incredible. I know we've not covered everything on a breakup. There's so much,
Yeah.
and recovery and going through all of it. So I'd love to do this, keep doing it for our audience, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Your last thought. I just want to end on this one very simple approach to this whole thing. The avoidant attached person may have someone with real compatibility, but they miss that because when something goes wrong, they think there's someone better. On the other hand, the person with an anxious attachment has someone who can't give them everything they need and has to learn whether or not to accept it or do the hard work of walking away. It's a very opposite situation where they both need to figure out, can this person actually be what I need? And root themselves in the reality of that connection, what exists or doesn't exist, and to let go of the idea that there's someone else or that this person needs to change.
Yeah. And for my anxious attached friends, a lot of times, you see people make a comment and say, oh, well, it seems like I've got to change my way, or I've got to understand, and I've got to be aware so that
Mm-hmm.
they can be, the avoidant attached, can be more comfortable. That's not what we're saying. We're sharing all of this information so that awareness will help you to feel more empowered.
Mm-hmm.
And as we continue this, I'm going to call it a series. I'm just going to put it out there in the universe that you and I are going to be doing this for our audience for a really long time. We're going to be sharing with the avoidant attached audience and friends that there are ways that you can also show up for an anxious attached or a secure attached. But yeah, this is about every one of us learning to be more grounded, more in our power, so that we could feel secure within ourselves first and secure in relationships. Yeah. Naj, it's always such a pleasure to speak with you.